They were finally helping him heal from his trauma, changing him bit by bit. Ito, deep in thought, realized something. He could see the future. But it wasn't as amazing as it sounded. The timing of these visions was totally random, and they only showed him a few minutes ahead. In short, life wasn't conveniently designed at all. He panicked, thinking to himself he was completely late for school. Frustrated, he muttered that, yeah, it was mostly his fault for oversleeping, but still, wasn't it also Ayako-san's job to wake him up? He shouted at her, demanding to know why she didn't wake him. Calm as ever, Ayako-san replied, waking up sleeping guys isn't part of my policy. As he began walking towards school, he sighed, realizing there was no point in rushing now. He was already going to miss class anyway. So he figured he might as well take his time. While strolling, he couldn't help but beat himself up over his ability. If only his visions had shown him something useful, like being late for school, then maybe, just maybe, he could have done something about it. Suddenly, another glimpse of the future flashes in his mind. In this vision, he sees two guys blocking a girl's path, trying to stop her from heading to school. They pressure her to ditch class and hang out with them instead. But the girl stands her ground, glaring at them and telling them to back off. There's no way she'd ever hang out with guys like that. The guys doubled down, trying to intimidate her, telling her not to get cocky if she knew what was good for her. But then one of them noticed Ito standing nearby, silently watching everything unfold. They barked at him to get lost. At the same time, they grabbed the girl by the arm, trying to drag her away with them. The vision faded, and the scene snapped back to reality. It looked like the future glimpse had ended. Ito stood frozen, clearly tense after witnessing another troublesome vision. Just as he was trying to figure out where that confrontation between the girl and those guys had taken place, he heard something. To his shock, he realized he was too late. The exact situation he saw was already playing out right in front of him. He started battling with himself, unsure of what to do. If he stayed there in silence, the future he just witnessed would come true. But stepping in could drag him into another mess. Part of him thought it'd be smarter to just walk away, to ignore it all and avoid getting tangled up again. But deep down, he knew what that meant. The girl would end up being harassed. He tried to convince himself, this has nothing to do with me. It doesn't matter. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't just stand there and do nothing. His feet moved on their own. Stepping forward, he called out to the girl from behind, casually greeted her and said, sorry for keeping you waiting. He went on, saying they were supposed to ditch school and go on a date, then asked her to come along with him. Meanwhile, inside his head, he was panicking. What the hell am I saying? Why did I even use the word date? The guy turned away from the girl and faced Ito, glaring. Are you her boyfriend or something? He asked. Ito froze. He needed an excuse, fast. But there was one problem: he didn't even know the girl's name. Just as panic set in and before he could say anything, the girl suddenly rushed over and grabbed his hand. She turned to Ito, asking why he was so late, and added that because of him, those weirdos had started harassing her. Ito felt a little embarrassed, especially since the girl accepted his excuse without question. Without missing a beat, she grabbed his hand and started pulling him away from the guys, shouting for him to run faster. The weirdos tried to follow them for a while, but eventually gave up on chasing the girl. After running for some time and seeing that they were far enough from the troublemakers, they stopped to rest under a bridge and catch their breath. Ito, completely exhausted from the sudden sprint, hadn't expected her to take off so quickly. The girl apologized to him for making him run and thanked him for saving her from the weirdos. She felt completely indebted to him for stepping in and helping her out. After a short pause, she asked him why he had helped her, adding that if he thought he'd get something in return for his actions. Ito was completely caught off guard by her sudden question. He struggled to come up with a reply, but before he could say anything, she interrupted him again. She seemed a bit suspicious and casually said, "It's fine." Then she started walking towards Ito, telling him that she would allow him to do it with her, but only once. He had his face turned completely red from the sudden provocation, and he couldn't find the words to respond. But before things could get more awkward, the girl burst out laughing. She told him it was just a joke and that she wasn't taking him seriously anyway. Ito got angry, thinking she was messing with him. The girl then turned around and told him to walk with her. Still unsure about what was happening, Ito asked, "Where are we going?" The girl replied that since they were already skipping school, they might as well go on a date. She teased him, blushing, but Ito wasn't in the mood for jokes. He told her it was just an excuse to keep the weirdos from bothering her, and that he wasn't serious about any of it. Without responding to Ito's earlier comment, the girl asked him for his name. She introduced herself as S. Fujibayashi. Ito, the MC, replied that his name was Ito Ares. The girl then told him to start walking. Ito was still trying to make sense of the situation and asked her if they were really going on a date. He mentioned that he had never been on a date before. However, the girl didn't seem to listen to anything Ito had just said. She explained that since there was nothing around them, they would take a train to the next town for their date. Ito, still completely confused, didn't know what to do. This was his very first date, and he had no idea what to expect from one. Yet, without his consent, they were already heading out on a date. The girl mentioned that she hadn't eaten anything since morning and suggested they go grab a snack. Ito, however, wasn't exactly on board with her idea of getting a snack. She ignored his lack of enthusiasm and added that she wanted to try a new drink. She then offered the MC a chance to try the drink she was having, but quickly denied him, citing the excuse of an indirect kiss. Afterward, she remembered she wanted to buy some new clothes and once again dragged Ito along with her. Hours had passed, but they were still far from finished with the clothes shopping. Ito, exhausted with bags in hand, asked if they were almost done. As they walked, they passed a Purakura booth, and the girl urged Ito to take some photos with her so she could remember the day. Suddenly, Ito saw a flash of Nanami and Yuri in front of his eyes. The MC got startled, wondering if dates were always this exhausting. But the girl, full of energy, was still talking about how great the day had been. The girl then asked Ito if he had some time and if they should head back soon, pointing out the bags they were carrying. After noticing the bags, she added that she would call a cab and told him not to worry. Ito thought to himself, wondering how she could call for a cab so casually, especially after spending so much money without any hesitation or remorse. He couldn't help but wonder if she was a very rich girl. The girl then remembered that there was a taxi stand nearby and that it would be quicker for them to grab a taxi from there to their town. She then asked Arsa which year he was in at school, and to her surprise, they both ended up being in the same year. She couldn't believe he was the same age and asked if he was a new student at the school since she didn't recognize him. Ito replied that he had just transferred last week, to which she responded, saying he was the rumored transfer student. She had heard rumors about Ito. He asked her what the rumor was about, but she ignored his question again and concluded that if he had known who she was, he probably wouldn't have spoken to her. Ito tried to ask her what she meant, but before he could, the girl spotted a taxi approaching them. She quickly told Arsa to put the bags in the car. As she was about to leave, she told him to greet her at school if they ever crossed paths. She then stepped uncomfortably close to Ito and told him that if he ever asked, she'd make sure he graduated from being a virgin. Ito, panicking, stammered and quickly said that he would never talk to her or even recognize her at school. She just laughed and waved him goodbye. Ego, still embarrassed by the conversation, started wondering how she even knew he was a virgin, and if she was used to that kind of thing. He also began to doubt whether she really needed his help to scare those weirdos off in the first place. And so, a long day for Ito comes to an end. The girl, still holding the photo she took with him, couldn't help but smile. She thought to herself that Ito was definitely someone worth teasing, and just remembering what happened made her laugh. As she called him a good guy, she wondered if she'd be able to see him again at school.
The next day at school, Sasuke approached Ito with a mischievous grin. He asked what Ito had been up to yesterday since he'd skipped class. With a teasing tone, Sasuke nudged him and joked, "Don't tell me you were off hanging out with another girl? You sure have a knack for ending up around them." Ito couldn't deny what Sasuke had just implied. After all, he really had spent the entire day with Fujibayashi. But the thought of telling Sasuke about it felt like it would only stir up more trouble than it was worth. So, instead of explaining anything, Ito just shrugged it off and said he'd overslept. Sasuke gave Ito a suspicious look but decided to let it slide. "All right, if you say so," he muttered. As they walked together toward their classroom, Sasuke started grumbling under his breath, complaining about how lucky Ito was. "Man, I wish I could just bump into some beauty while turning a corner too." Just as Sasuke was about to finish his sentence, a loud thud echoed from his direction. He had walked straight into a girl. Ito turned quickly and asked, "You all right, Sasuke?" Clutching his shoulder, Sasuke snapped at the person he'd bumped into, glaring as he barked, "Hey, watch where you're going next time." To their surprise, the person Sasuke had collided with was none other than Fujibayashi, the same girl Ito had spent the day with yesterday. As soon as her eyes met Sasuke's, she made a face of clear annoyance. But the moment she noticed Ito nearby, her expression shifted, and without saying a word, she turned on her heel and dashed off. Ito called out her name from behind, hoping she'd stop, but she had already disappeared into the crowd. He stood there, puzzled, still trying to make sense of why she bolted the moment she saw him. Sasuke, thinking Ito had somehow scared Fujibayashi off, gave him a thankful nod. But Ito, surprised that even Sasuke knew her by name, couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked, "Wait, is she someone famous or something?" Sasuke leaned in a bit, lowering his voice like he was sharing some forbidden secret. Fujibayashi-sana's surrounded by all sorts of rumors, he said. People say she's got this scary delinquent boyfriend from Higashi High. Real bad news. And hey, word is, if she sets her sights on you, no one really knows what might happen next. Sasuke gave Ito a half-joking, half-serious warning glare. Suddenly, a thought struck Ito, those weirdos who were bothering Fujibayashi yesterday. They were from the same school as her rumored boyfriend, Higashi High, but the way Sasuke described her just now didn't match the Fujibayashi he met at all. Ito couldn't reconcile that dangerous image with the girl he spent the day with, making it even harder for him to believe any of it. Ito looked at Sasuke and asked, "Are you sure any of that's even true?" Sasuke shrugged, grinning a little. "Honestly, I don't even know. That's just what I've heard from other people. Could all just be rumors." Sasuke continued, "Fujibayashi's also known for, well, let's say, helping guys lose their virginity. Apparently, it's kind of her thing. She even said something similar to you yesterday. Didn't she?" Ito flinched, remembering what had happened. Sasuke grinned, adding, "If it had been me, I wouldn't mind offering my first time to a beautiful girl like her." Ito couldn't help but laugh, shaking his head. "You were literally trembling just a minute ago after running into her." "Yeah, sure." Ito entered the classroom and placed his bag on the table. As he was about to settle in, Yuri approached him, looking a bit curious. "Hey, why were you absent from school yesterday?" she asked, her tone more inquisitive than usual. Ito noticed something different in her eyes, a kind of gaze he hadn't seen from her before. The usual hostility she once directed at him was completely gone. Instead, it was almost as if she was interested. Ito quickly came up with another excuse, telling Yuri that he wasn't feeling well and needed to take a break from school, so he stayed home to rest. As always, Yuri wasn't convinced. She eyed him skeptically and, with a hint of disbelief in her voice, replied, "I don't buy it. Are you sure that's really the reason?" Ito was getting really tired of all the questions thrown at him since the morning. Frustrated, he finally asked Yuri, "Why are you so curious about me skipping school?" Yuri quickly replied, "It's not that I'm curious about it. I just had a hard time without you here." Ito, clearly confused by her response, pressed further. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, trying to get some clarity. Yuri quickly mentioned committee work, but Ito felt like that was just an excuse. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. She went on to explain that she had to handle all the health committee duties by herself. Ito, surprised, replied, "I never agreed to join the health committee." Yuri shrugged and said, "It doesn't matter if you agreed or not. It was decided yesterday during the committee assignments." Yuri continued, explaining that she had volunteered to be the health committee representative for the girls. However, it was taking too long to pick someone from the boys. Because of this, the homeroom teacher decided to assign the role to Ito. Ito was clearly frustrated about being chosen for the role without his consent. Yuri then explained that the first task of the committee was to check and restock hygiene supplies around the school. Because he wasn't there, she had to cover extra areas on her own. Yuri then told Ito to handle all the committee work for the day on his own, which he reluctantly agreed to. However, Yuri had also assigned him a special task as punishment for his absence. Ito, fuming with anger, called Yuri a jerk for piling on even more work. The special task she had in mind? Watching over the nurse's office. The task was exhausting for Ito, even though he only had to manage it until the school nurse returned from her errands. It wasn't the kind of work a health committee member would normally do. This was just another chore Yuri had assigned him to make his workload heavier and punish him for being absent. Yuri couldn't stand the fact that Ito was slacking off while everyone else was doing the work for him. Fortunately, no one had come to the nurse's office, which made Ito's job a little easier. The scene shifts as Ito experiences another glimpse of the future. He hears two voices. One of them is crying, saying something about wanting to go home, while the second voice gently asks if she's okay. Ito looked back and saw a girl lying on the basketball court, clutching her knee in pain. It suddenly hit him he was in a precognitive vision. He felt a rush of excitement, realizing that he was no longer bored. His curiosity sparked, and he wondered if the girl was from the basketball club. Just as he was about to reach a conclusion, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. The door to the nurse's office creaked open, revealing a beautiful girl in a sports jersey standing in the doorway. The girl was surprised to find Ito sitting there and asked if the teacher wasn't around. She then stepped closer and asked if he was the health committee member. Ito nodded in agreement and added that the teacher was out. The girl then walked over to the cupboard, mentioning that she didn't really need the teacher and was just there to grab some sports tape since she had run out. She continued, saying that the nurse always gave her some whenever she needed it, and asked Ito to let the teacher know she took the tape from the shelf. Ito agreed, assuring her he would. She then jumped onto the stool beside her and began applying the tape to her legs. The way she was tying it seemed a bit sloppy to Ito, so he asked her if that was the correct way to do it. After hearing Ito's comment, she started to reconsider the way she was tying the tape. Watching her continuously struggle to bind and unbind it started to irritate Ito. It seemed painful to him. Ito offered to help her with the tape. Without hesitation, she accepted his offer. She thanked him and lifted her leg toward him. Ito was immediately flustered by the request to bind the tape on her leg. Despite his embarrassment, he quickly got to work, though the situation left him feeling completely unsettled, knowing he had to touch her to do it. Ito apologized and then carefully wrapped the tape around her leg. Seeing how expertly he did it, the girl was genuinely grateful. Ito then asked if she had injured her leg. The girl introduced herself as Suka from the basketball team and told him to stop being so formal, since they were the same age. She then asked if he was the infamous transfer student. Suka double-checked his name while shaking his hand. Suddenly, she remembered she had practiced to attend, and quickly realized she needed to head back. Ito advised her not to push herself too hard, as it could make the sprain worse. However, Suka reassured him that she was fine now that he had taped her up and left the room, thanking him before she went. Once Ito was alone again, he found himself getting bored. He began thinking about the future vision he had just experienced, wondering if Takimoto-san was the girl he had seen in it. He began to wonder if it was really okay for her to practice with that kind of leg injury. A wave of panic hit him as he started to question whether he should have stopped her from going to practice. Seeing the nurse return, Ito quickly rushed out of the nurse's office. He was drenched in sweat, but what really stressed him out was the thought that if he had been even a minute late, things could have gone wrong. Finally, he spotted Suka playing basketball. Before he could say anything, she jumped for a dunk. But as she landed, she twisted her leg, injuring herself once again.